Eli.
What? Eli.
Eli, I didn't Eli. No,
Glad to have you guys
second
with us.
Eli, I know, I work with one.
Okay. All right. Well, good morning. My name is Norm Ellis. This is the Adult One Bible Study at Grace Baptist Church. For those of you online, glad to have everybody here today. And we're going to be studying in Psalms chapter 18. Not all the verses, but we'll go through some of them. And if you're following along in your study book, it's called God's Deliverance, except it says God's Wisdom. They did a mistake.
God is wise to deliver
Yes,
us.
yes, he is. Apparently they did a cut and paste, or forgot to do the cut and paste, or whatever it was. So it should be God's Deliverance. Anyway, session number 7, page 60 through 68. Yeah, God's Wisdom is incorrect. It should be God's Deliverance.
Oh, okay.
They oopsied.
Somebody.
That's the first time I've seen them make that big a mistake. Anyway, the main idea today is that God protects and defends those who belong to Him. And we're going to be looking at these three areas. The God who rescues, that's verses 16 through 19. Faithfulness rewarded, 20 through 24. And hope given, 25 through 29. And so I got some scenarios on the board there. Oh, before I go any further, we do have handouts today also. And the handouts look like this. For those of you online, if you want a copy, our pastor Matthew would be glad to send them to you. Just let him know at our church, and he'll put you on that email list. What was I going to say about that? What was I going to say? I don't remember. Okay. Oh, our intro paragraph is on the first copy. That's right. So, in life, there's many kinds of things that we see and read and have to adhere to and stuff. And we got some warning signs that sometimes tell you what? No swimming beyond this point, right? We also have things like highway workers wearing orange, bright orange vests and hard hats, right? We also see people fastening their seat belts in a car or on a plane. Not on motorcycles. I don't understand. He's a motorcycle rider. Anyway, so what
has airbags?
What would you see? The airbag on a motorcycle. There
Yes.
What is the overall theme of those kind of scenarios? What do you think?
Safety.
Could be safety, yeah. Although the swimming beyond this point, probably because it's dangerous, right? Maybe riptide or heavy currents or something like that, right? But it's basically illustrating that there are what in life?
Dangers.
Dangers, right? Dangers we need to look out for. And so when we run into dangerous situations, sometimes, like in this flooding we just recently had in Texas, people need to deliver us from those dangers, right? This one helicopter crew, they rescued a whole bunch of people. They're just going back and forth. I think it's over 20 people they rescued or something like that. Anyway, the intro paragraph on the first handout that we have says, the world is filled with dangers. Because of this, we are thankful for those who serve in our military, law enforcement, and fire and rescue to protect and defend us from danger. We also lock our doors and we turn on lights at night to ward off threats. We can appreciate all these things. However, believers, Christians, have a protector and defender who's with us 24/7. Notice the capitalization of protector and defender. No person is exempt from experiencing adversity, but God is always ready to protect and defend those who belong to Him. So what kind of measures do you sometimes take to protect yourself or the people you care about or things you value in life? What are some measures, some things you might do?
Insurance.
You guys have to talk to me. Insurance! Yeah, we love to pay insurance premium. No, we don't. But we love it when we get in a situation where we need to have that advantage, That's a good one. Anything else come to mind? I don't have a list, so whatever you guys say is good for me. All kinds of things though, right?
Don't go beyond where there's a steep cliff. There's often a sign, don't go beyond the fence.
Yeah, but people do it and they fall down cliffs sometimes. Something I was thinking about too. When we leave the house, I'll leave a radio on.
Yeah.
Because I've been told, it sounds like there's somebody home. You need to leave a talk radio on or something like that. So I do that sometimes. Leave a light on if I'm going to be gone for a while overnight, things like that. There's things that we can do. You can list all your valuables on inventory, so when you do make an insurance claim, you'll know what you're claiming, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of things we can do. What prompts us to take these steps, though? Why do we take these steps?
you're aware of the dangers today. Or there's a lot of vandalism, a lot
Okay,
of
so crime.
crime.
Crime might prompt us to do this, right? Concern, put a seatbelt on. We're not moving the car till you do, son. Something like that. Well, because you care about your son or daughter, right? My 3 boys, we didn't move the car till they were all buckled
Yeah.
in. Sorry. And nowadays, I can tell when somebody unbuckles. My new car that I've had,
Alarms.
there's a little light comes on. All right, who unbuckled?
Yeah.
Grandkid back there unbuckled. Just buckle it back, buddy. So, a lot of things will prompt us to take these kind of steps in life. Each day we take steps to protect ourselves from harm's way. Each day there are people who stand in the gap to offer protection to others. Now, in our little study book here, on page 60, 60? No, actually, I already read that part. Never mind. I went backwards. In today's session, we're going to be looking at Psalms 18. Who wrote Psalms 18? What do you think? David. David wrote a lot of the Psalms, didn't he? Yes, he did. And this is one of the ones. And there's something called understanding the context that we're going to look at briefly here. And that's on page 61 of our study book. And this gives us an idea, sort of an overall overview of what we're going to be looking at today. And if I'm going too fast, slow me down and say, hey, what did you mean by that? Let me know. And we can talk about whatever it is. In Psalm 18 is a hymn of thanksgiving. Okay? In it, David recalled the numerous victories that the Lord had given him over his enemies, including King Saul. Remember what King Saul wanted to do? He wanted to kill David. He was jealous of him. It says a parallel version of this psalm is also recorded in 2 Samuel 22. A lot of these psalms have parallels that are in Chronicles or Kings, I've noticed. And Samuel in this case. It says the psalm is divided into 5 sections. The first section is David praised the Lord, who was his strength, his rock, his fortress, his deliverer, his shield, his salvation, and stronghold. These are very important words. We're going to look at that briefly in just a moment here. It says what are the characteristics of God we see in these first 15 verses. That's not our main part. Our main part starts in verse 16. But we're going to look at the first ones because they kind of apply as well. But some of these words here will apply to that question, actually. It says in the second section, David depicted how the Lord saved him when he was about to die. He described how the Lord delivered him from his enemy by an awesome display of his power over and through nature. That's 4 through 19. And then in the third section, David extolled the Lord for his faithfulness. He was grateful to the Lord. He was thanking the Lord. That's what extolling means, essentially. In the fourth section, David delineated how God had prepared him for battle and given him many victories. And that's 30 through 45. We're not going to get to those probably, but you can read that later. It's a very good recount. Finally, David returned to where he began his psalm, thanking and praising the Lord, his rock, and the God of his salvation. That's 46 through 50. When David's life was in danger, like we talked about already, about the dangers in life that we see, right? He cried out to the Lord, and the Lord saved him. In Psalm 18, David recognized that the Lord had done and praised him for it. This psalm should remind each one of us, just as David had his enemies, that we as believers do too. The New Testament indicates that the world, the flesh, and the devil, and death are our enemies. And in 1 Corinthians 15 and Ephesians 2, it talks about that. Psalm 18 should remind us that the Lord has given us everything we need and in himself to defeat these enemies. Jesus won the victory for us and has saved us. He has equipped us with everything we need to resist our enemies. Everything God did for David, he does for us in Jesus. We live and stand firm because of our victory in him. So let's trust in the Savior and praise him with thanksgiving just as David did. Now we're done, we can go home. No. Like I said, it's sort of a summary, but we're going to look at a little bit more here. And I just wanted to read through it so we got some of that background for those other verses. And it's always important to see that. So, King David, and we have a couple of visual aids out here, and I'm just going to point them out to you really quick. There's a map showing the boundaries of Israel when David was king and Solomon. And this poster here, I've also got you a copy in our handouts of essentially what this poster talks about here. But God is our, and there's various things where it talks about that. And the different types of psalms is listed here for some of the ones. We're in 18 today. I think 18 is considered one of the royal, yeah, here it is. Psalm 18 is considered a royal hymn, but it's also a hymn in general too. But it's by David, and since it's by David, they kind of attach the kingliness because David was king, right? So David is a real important guy, right? He was, wasn't he? Yeah. He established Israel's strongest position in history of Israel, along with Solomon, his son, of course. But so the things that David said, the things that David experienced, are important for us to understand and see. And what did David go through as far as adversity that you remember? Kind of talked about one.
He tossed a rock.
All right. Yeah.
To start off, when he was just very young, he took the challenge of the Philistines and
his brothers, his older brothers, were in the army and they were fighting against the Philistines, right? Philistines had their champion, this 9 foot tall giant. They think it might be 9 foot. We're not really sure. There's a certain measurement they had called a cubit, and we're not exactly sure what the size is, but it could have been that tall. Big guy, really huge guy. And so the idea was, you pick your champion and we have ours. And then we'll fight, and whoever wins. And then, no, that guy's too big. David was not afraid of him, because David had honed his skills taking care of the flock. Remember that? What did David do with his flock? He's protected from the lion, the bear, and other things like that, right? And he used his sling and other things that he had. So he looked upon this the same situation. God delivered him from the bear. God delivered him from the lion. God can deliver me from this giant.
Yeah, but nobody else among all those people accepted that challenge. But David is a very young.
Yeah, David trusted the Lord, didn't he? He trusted the Lord. So this is important to see what David had to say about these kind of things. That's why we're studying these verses today. So as we go through these verses, I want you to notice how many of these characteristics God in Psalms that we see. Shield, rock, king, shepherd, judge, refuge, fortress, avenger, creator, deliverer, healer, protector, provider, redeemer. I know those of you online can't read those. I'm sorry for that. It's out of your visual range. But it is on my handouts. If you look at handout number 2, which is the 3rd page, imagine that there. It looks like this, except mine's in color. You'll have a copy there also. And so you can follow along in there as well to notice those things. I do have some verses that I was going to hand out. I forgot to do that out the top here. Could you read one for me? You don't mind? Usually you don't mind, so I can. And you don't have to read if you don't want to.
I can read.
You want one? Okay. You do that one for me. And I'll give you this one here. And that gives you an opportunity. You don't have to read that translation per se. It's the New American Standard, but if you have something else like NIV or King James, that's fine too. But these are our focal verses we'll be looking at, and I think it's good to get other people involved with it, other than just me talking. Sure. Probably get tired of hearing me talk, right? Yeah. So let's see. Let's look at the first point in our study today. And the first one is the God who rescues. Now, I worked for a long time, from 1987 to 2006. I worked at Portland International Airport. There's a guard base there. And I worked for the Air Force Reserves, because the Reserves had a unit there. It was a rescue unit. And our rescue unit went out and saved people off of Mount Hood all the time, and saved them off this and this and this. I don't know if you've been in the area very long, you probably remember our helicopters doing that.
Yeah.
One of them rolled down the mountain.
I saw that.
That wasn't my fault. I was a maintenance person, but no, that was a problem. They miscalculated their load. They thought they had less load and more thrust. They didn't. So the rotor blades lost a little bit of thrust, lost their ability to keep the helicopter lifted. And it started to do this number, and so they cut the cable, and they. Luckily, no one died. Somebody got run over by the helicopter, but it was on snow, so everyone survived well. The helicopter, not so much. It was pretty much a
Total loss.
Loss, yeah. But anyway, all I have to say is I worked in rescue in that sense. I maintained helicopters and whale set C-130s, and that was an exciting thing to do. So I know what it means to rescue. So our first point is the God who rescues. It's important to have somebody who, if we get in a bad situation, we need to be delivered. God's deliverance means to be delivered or saved from that situation. So I can relate to that a little. Can you guys relate to that too? I hope.
Yeah, I was in nursing, so.
There you go. Yeah, you helped a lot of people, right? So anyway, in these first 4 verses, I want you to listen for God's action to protect David. Okay? Who's got number 1? You got number 1. Go ahead and read it for me.
He reached down from high and took hold of me. He drew me out of the deep waters. He rescued me from my powerful enemies, from my foes who were too strong for me. They confronted me in the day of my disasters, but the Lord was my support. He brought me out into a spacious place. He rescued me because he delighted in me.
So we see scenarios here where David got into some really pickles, didn't he? And he didn't know how he was going to get out of that situation. But God already knew. God took care of him, right? And that's what it's relating. So what are some of the things you hear as far as God's action in these verses?
He reached down.
He reached down from on high or from heaven.
Out of the water,
Okay.
whether that was real water or just danger.
It could have been metaphorical. That's true. He could have been using it in a way. We see that happening in the news with all the things that happened in Texas. How rescue choppers were drawing them out of the waters. Because what happens in a flood? You get carried away, and what happens usually? You die. You unless you're a strong swimmer or you're very lucky, you're going to get consumed by the flood, right? So for this to happen, do you think you'd be happy?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, right?
Very happy.
Yeah. So they had floods back then, and they know what this is all about. So, and then the next thing he does is what? What's the next thing you see? God's action was against David's enemies, right? It says he delivered them.
From those who hated him.
Right. From those enemies, those who hated him. For they were too mighty for me. And so David recognized something. There are certain things I cannot do on my own. And that's a tough thing, especially for guys, to come to that realization is, no, you can't do that. No, I can do it.
Yeah.
Just give me enough wax at this and I can do it, right? That's what we sometimes think, right? But we see that David recognized, no, there's certain things I have to depend on God. God alone. Are there things in your life you come across that have been that kind of situation for you?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was trying to think. When I was a kid, my dad was out of work. He worked for Boeing's, and this is, I can't remember the exact time frame this was, but Boeing's basically had overextended themselves, and they had invested heavily in something called the SST, and because Congress was going to pay for this thing to come in, so they invested very heavily. Then Congress says, nah, they cut the funding, and so Boeing was like, what? And so they suddenly realized they could go bankrupt here because they invested so much. So they started cutting back. My dad worked for Boeing's. He worked for Boeing's for like 18, 19 years. And they moved him one area to another area to another area to another area because all these people were getting laid off. And eventually they cut to where he was in his seniority. So he was laid off. So we were without funds for about a year or so. And because, Boeing can call you back. So that was the idea. Well, hopefully they'll lay off. So this downturn that happened in the Seattle area continued for quite a while. So my dad did not get called back. And so we were on food stamps. We were getting help from church and stuff like that. They'd bring us different things to help us out. And my dad was doing odd jobs. And as a teenager, I was growing up during this time, and it really profoundly affected me. I know it did. And then I saw God deliver us. Because just out of the blue, my dad had an opportunity to work for the Navy Yard in Bremerton. And there was a lot of people vying for these jobs. But he got hired. And so God took care of us in a family situation. And I'll never forget that, because I remember it was kind of embarrassing, like I said, to be in that situation as a kid. But God brought us through that. Anything like that you can remember in your lives that profoundly affected you, and you noticed how God's hand was in it?
Divorce.
Okay.
I'm
Oh
sorry,
yeah.
but it was a
When families go
terrible.
through that, it's a terrible thing, and sometimes people never recover. But God can help you through that kind of situation. Yeah. Especially when there's children involved and things like that, it can be devastating, right?
Yeah. That was it was a bad time.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes
God did
Yeah.
really. God did help.
Sometimes we're involved in accidents, other things like that that can happen to us, right? Those kind of things happen in life. Those kind of things go on, and we have to deal with the consequences. But when God delivers us, it's a clear thing. You realize, well, how could this have happened except by God's hand? And things like that have happened in our lives that way. It says, that was in verse 17. In verse 18, they confronted me, in the day of my calamity. I can't remember exactly the phrasing on yours translation. But the Lord was my stay. In other words, even though I was going through this devastating time, the Lord stayed with me. He was keeping me safe. It says, and he brought me forth also into a broad place. Now, what do you think that means, brought into a broad place? Does that even make sense?
Well, if you're in a cramped place, it's uncomfortable.
Okay,
Whereas
that could be it. Yeah.
Spacious, he was, I think, a happy place. And in 19 it says, he rescued me because he delighted in me. God was happy with David.
I was trying to find where it talked about that here, and it's a spacious place, it says in NIV.
Yeah.
Because the Hebrew word for spacious place implies more than a generous amount of square footage. Usually it suggests a safe place that could offer comfort, such as a place that stood in contrast to the severe constrictions that crowded David and left him feeling like a prisoner to his difficulties. David's testimony about the Lord's provision of a safe, secure place resembled the crisis that Moses and the Israelites faced when they found themselves at the Red Sea. The oncoming Egyptian army was on one side, and the Red Sea was on the other, and they were in the middle, like they were inside of a vice, squeezing them. They were not in a safe place, except the Lord was with them, right? The Lord was with them. And what did he do? He allowed them to cross the Red Sea safely, giving his people a path for crossing through safely. So that's the illusion when you see a broad place. It would be a safer place. I think of a lot of times like when they're rescuing people with a helicopter. They take them off something like a mountainside or some place where they're hurt, and they take them and they bring them to a big open meadow, and they lower them down and put them that way. They can get them into the ambulance and drive them home back. But a safe place would be that big meadow or a big open place instead of on that mountain. It's kind of the way I think about when I see that particular reference there. It also says in the word that is in Hebrew, which I don't know the Hebrew there, but it says took hold. That suggests placing something in one's hand and carrying it. So that's what David is saying, is that the Lord grabbed me. He grabbed me and he held onto me with a firm grip. You know, when you think of that, I think of when you're taking care of children when they're very young, and you're in a place, I don't know, maybe you're walking up Beacon Rock. Have you ever been to Beacon Rock before? What do you do with that child?
Put them on the inside.
Yeah, you hold on tight, right? Yeah, when they get a certain age, like when they're your age, you're smart enough, right? But the young kids, you got to protect, right? Because they don't know any better.
Even in a parking lot.
Yeah, oh yeah, parking lot.
Especially the parking lot.
Yeah, and any of those places, you need to take a firm hold. And that's the picture I have in my mind, is that God, and David is saying, God relates that he held on to me. I felt secure. I felt safe because my Father in heaven was keeping me safe. And that's kind of a neat picture, isn't it? I like that picture. See, we talked about that already. What else was the other thing I was going to bring up? Well, yeah, I think I covered most of those things. Anyway, the powerful enemy David mentioned may also have been King Saul. I think that, and what the verse that was in,
From 17.
yeah.
He rescued me from my powerful enemy.
Yeah. Could have been King Saul, because he was on the run from Saul for quite a while, remember? And he would hide in the caves to get away from Saul. And one particular time, King Saul came to the cave, and while he was sleeping, or I can't remember which one it was, there was a couple of situations, but he actually cut part of his robe off. And then later said, "See, King Saul, I could have killed you, here's part of your robe, but God was protecting you by having me there, because I was not going to kill you." And so Saul, for the moment, went away and stopped chasing him. He continued later on. But anyway, that is probably the powerful enemy they're talking about. And David's, when God gave David success, military success, Saul became jealous, and he wanted to eliminate David by his own hand or by that of Israel's enemies, the Philistines. So Saul watched David's military successes pile up higher and higher. He witnessed the dancing that they did and the songs they did just to praise David. And all this worked on Saul. Even his own son, Jonathan, heir to the throne, loved David, his enemy. So you can imagine what this must have did to Saul.
And Saul sent Jonathan to kill David, but he
wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it, yeah. So it's comforting to know that the believers today, just like you guys here in this classroom and watching online, we do face difficult times, but we do not need to face them alone. Like David, God still provides that spacious place, that safe zone for the ones in whom he finds delight. And that's the whole point of that, as David is pointing it out. That's what God did for me. And that's what God does for us. Any comments or questions on those verses? Well, let's look at the next group then. This is number 2. It's called Faithfulness Rewarded. We talked about the God who rescues, and faithfulness rewarded now. And on these next 5 verses, I want you to listen for why David felt God rescued him. Why David felt that God rescued him. Who has number 2?
I do. And this is from Holman Bible.
Holman, stay by? Okay.
The Lord rewarded me according to my righteousness. He repaid me according to the cleanness of my hands. For I have kept the ways of the Lord and have not turned from my God to wickedness. Indeed, I have kept all his ordinance in mind and have not disregarded his statutes. I was blameless towards him and kept myself from sinning. So the Lord repaid me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanness of my hands in his sight.
Okay, so now do these verses look like they're kind of repeating themselves a little bit? There's a reason for that.
A little bit.
There's a reason for that. Yeah. That's a technique that the people who wrote in poetic ways. And there's a fancy $10 word. I might make sure I get it right here.
Yeah.
It's called chiasm. And if you look at handout number 1, which is the second page, I got a little thing on that, only because it's kind of an interesting way that they're doing this, and I don't mean to get bogged down in this, but it's a Greek word, and it's pronounced chiasm. It's a literary or rhetorical device with symmetrical structure. It arranges things in a mirror image pattern. The order of the words or the ideas in one section gets reversed and mirrored on the other side. So it comes from the Greek word chi, which is, and it resembles a cross, okay, or a big X, I should say. This shape visually represents crisscrossing or intersecting pattern, and basically showing that these two ideas that are being showed poetically, they come together in the middle, don't they? Like the cross does. And because of that, they support the middle. The two ends support the middle. And it's just, like I said, it's just a poetic way of that they like to do structures. Jesus taught certain things that same way. He'd say it one way, he'd say the truth, and he'd say it the other way at the end. A lot of people do. There's a speech by Abraham Lincoln he does something similar to, that they pointed out. So anyway, these verses are in that kind of a pattern, is what I'm getting at. And like I said, verse 20 corresponds to verse 24, for instance. Verse 21 corresponds to verse 23. This structure draws attention to the center. What's the center verse? Is verse 22. So what is the main part? It says, "For all his ordinances were before me, and I did not put away." his statutes from me. Okay, so those other verses in front, those other verses in back, they all support that main idea. Kind of gives you an idea of why they do it, is to remind us, well, this is important. It's so important, I'm telling you why here, I'm telling you why here, and this is the main part that's so important. And like I said, you'll see that in a lot of things, even in things that people do today. It's a very common teaching technique because it emphasizes a point, and when you hear it twice at least, the idea is you remember it. So that's why David wrote that particular way.
There's an expression, repetition for emphasis.
Yes, in different ways sometimes, because not everybody communicates the same way. Certain words mean different things to different people. So that's why it's done that way. So we see verse 20 talks about David's righteousness and cleanliness of hands, right? Verse 24, again, is referring to David's righteousness and cleanliness of hands. Then verse 21, David has kept the ways of the Lord. Verse 22, David has kept himself from iniquity. Very similar there. It all focuses on verse 22. God's word is David's guide in life. So those things all support that. Anyway, little aside there. These verses reveal both David's attitude and his actions towards God. David was far from blameless, and he wasn't perfect. But he chose to do what? He chose to obey God, right? Obey God rather than disregard God's word. And that's kind of the main thing. And it refers to Psalm 19, 7 through 11. We have time. I can look at that really quick, I think. That's the next chapter, isn't it? Let's see here. Sometimes it's hard
Psalms
to find.
19, you said?
Yeah, Psalms 19.
What verses?
Psalms 19, 7 through 11. You got them already?
Yeah.
Okay. Go
The
ahead.
law of the Lord is perfect, refreshing the soul. The statutes of the Lord are trustworthy, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, giving joy to the heart. The commands of the Lord are radiant, giving light to the eyes. You said through 11?
Yes.
The fear of the Lord is pure, enduring forever. The decrees of the Lord are firm, and all of them are righteous. They are more precious than gold, than much pure gold. They are sweeter than honey from the honeycomb. By them your servant is warned, in keeping them there is great reward.
Okay, great. So we see similarities when we look at those verses too, don't we? Between the ones we just got through reading. And there's a reason for that, because guess who authors this psalm too? David! Which makes sense then, doesn't it? Anyway, so it's a recurring theme is what I'm getting at. We see a lot of similarities, but there are also some differences between these verses. But note the importance of honoring and obeying God's word. He talks about in that verse and in the verses we just finished before that. So this is a reoccurring theme. We strive to maintain righteousness, righteous hearts, and clean hands. Why do you think a righteous heart and clean hands is so important? You think it's important?
Yeah.
If your heart is in the right place,
And
that's your inner part, right? And your hands are clean as well. That's all of you. That's the inside, and that's the physical as well. And I think that's what he's trying to say is when you're all totally involved in this, that's when you're obeying God the best. It's sort of a rhetorical question here. In other words, you don't have to answer this one. But what steps of faithfulness to God do we need to take today? You know, maybe in your life there's some things as well that you're not quite as faithful in. And maybe there's some steps of faithfulness you need to do as well. So David showed us some good examples here, and I think this is a good thing for us to as well to follow. Any comments or questions about those verses that struck you? Anything interesting there? We're doing really good on our time. We're not going to be late today at all.
Sometimes you feel, I feel tired and think, maybe I won't go to church today. But if you come, you feel refreshed. So
you know, that's funny how that is. Yeah. I've done that before myself. You know, I think, I'm kind of tired. I don't know if I want to do this, or I'm distracted because of things. And then suddenly I look and I focus a little bit, and before you know it, those things kind of become less significant. They don't go away totally.
No.
But they're in the right priorities now. They're in the right order now. I think it's a lot of it right there. Because David knew he had these problems, and he knew that God was going to lead him. He just had to listen to God. And I think that's what we need to do. David moved from examining his own attitude and actions to rejoicing in God's faithfulness in his life. God is faithful to us in our lives as well. So don't miss that. Let's look.
He frees us from our enemies. And sometimes it isn't so much enemies as maybe bad influences, or and if you stay away from that, yeah, God will be with you.
There's something on that I was going to look at. The Bible commentary talks a little bit about the cleanliness of hands as also. It says, although being righteous started where? On the inside, David demonstrated his commitment to God through also his actions, the outside. Along with a clean heart, he also lived with clean hands. What he said and what he did validated his relationship with God, just like we just said. So similar things there. Anything else I missed? No, I think that's the main part. So let's go on here. I don't want to beat the dead horse, right? Let's look at the last one we have. The last verses 25 through 29. We talk about the God who rescues. The faithfulness is rewarded. And now we're talking about hope given. Do we like hope in our lives? I certainly do. That's why I get up in the morning. I hope today's going to be a good day, right?
Last week focused on hope a lot.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. And hope is one of those things. It's not wish. We don't talk about hope in the sense of, I really hope Christmas comes soon. That's wishing that something will happen. This is knowing that God will do it, and listening to His voice, realizing when He does it in our lives. We know it's coming for us because He's promised us. It's like when we know that God is coming again, right? He's coming at His second coming. So we have that hope. We look forward to that event that we know is going to happen. We don't hope it's going to happen in a sense of wish. We know it's going to happen. It's certainty in our lives. Okay, let's look at the next verses. In these last 5 verses, I want you to note the key words that reveal more of the characteristics of God. And you got that for me, Chris?
Yep, I'll start right. With the kind, you show yourself kind. With the blameless, you show yourself blameless. With the pure, you show yourself pure. And with the crooked, you show yourself astute. For you save an afflicted people, but the haughty you bring low. For you light my lamp. The Lord my God illumines my darkness. For by you I can run upon a troop, and by my God I can leap over a wall.
Now, New American Standard sometimes is a little difficult to understand because it's a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? Unyielding in some of the things. So I like to always compare some of these with the NIV, for instance. The NIV is a little more of a thought for thought. And so I'm going to read the NIV here as well. It says, to the faithful, you show yourself faithful. To the blameless, you show yourself blameless. That's the same. To the pure, you show yourself pure. But to the devious, you show yourself shrewd. You save the humble, but bring low those who are eyes are haughty. Okay, in other words, prideful. Does that make sense? Okay. You, Lord, keep my lamp burning. My God turns my darkness into light. And with your help, I can advance against a troop. In other words, people who are aligned against me, usually military-wise, an army. Remember, he had to fight against those different troops, right? And with my God, I can scale a wall, or I can leap over a wall. Like Superman, you feel that power. No, not actually, but he's relating to how God enthuses him. It gives him that hope for the future, and that's what we're talking about, the hope given here, right? So what are some of the key words we see in here? Notice any key words?
You rescue.
Okay.
You rescue afflicted people.
Okay. What verse was that?
27.
Oh, yeah, 27. That's right. Exactly.
You light my lamp.
Okay. Is that important to have a lamp, have a light at night?
Yes, but also just emotionally speaking, when you're in a tough time, relying on God gives you a light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak.
Yeah. Whenever I read these kind of verses, I'm always remembering when I've been in 8 Cave. Anybody here been in 8 Cave before? Have you been in 8 Cave before? Oh, you gotta go sometime. It's really something. And it's a really easy cave to go through unless you go through the upper section. It's a little more challenging there. But once you get in a little ways, it's a really neat thing to try. Turn off your light and just wait a little bit. And after you wait a little bit, usually your eyes will get used to the darkness. You can see things, right? You can't. It's that dark.
Yeah.
You can't. You put your hand right here. You can feel the heat of your hand. You cannot see your hand.
Yeah.
What do you feel when you're in a dark place like that? Despair sometimes? Frightened, maybe?
Confined.
Yeah.
Yes.
Confined, yeah.
I feel like it's close.
Right. I'm gonna remember that because that's a good point. I gotta bring up here.
Feel like Schrodinger's cat?
Yeah. Yeah. I
What
guess.
was that?
Schrodinger's cat.
Yeah, that's an old
Oh.
argument from what, physics or something. Anyway, but when you're in that cave, you can't see the rocks around you, so you don't take a step. You have to wait, right? And so that's the picture of this. Is he lights the lamp so we can then see. So you turn that lamp on, suddenly you can see all around that cave. Because that little bit of light, we had no light before, illumines the whole thing. I've even taken a match. I used to be a counselor for the Royal Ambassadors, which was a Christian organization that we had at our church. And we would take the kids to the cave, and I'd do that. I'd turn off all the lights, I'd light one little match. And with that one little match, you suddenly can see everything. It's just amazing. And that's what the picture here is that this lamp God has lit for us. It shows up and takes away that darkness. It's quite a picture. Now you talk about being confined. I used to also, we call it diving tanks. I worked on C-130 aircraft in the military, and we would have to get into the fuel tanks, and on the helicopters too sometimes, it depends which helicopter it was, to replace probes. These little fuel quantity probes. That's just how the pilot knows how much fuel he has, right? If you don't have enough fuel, you don't want to go on a mission and run out of fuel. It's a bad thing. The Air India jet proved that just recently. I don't know if you've seen that in the news or not. Apparently, they shut off their fuel.
What?
They shut off the switches, put them in cutoff. They didn't realize. That's what it sounds like. Now, maybe they didn't. Maybe some automatic function did that. But the Air India jet that crashed not long ago, apparently they found that the fuel switches were put in cutoff. So anyway, fuel quantity is really important. So I would have to go inside the tanks. Well, these tanks are not big like you're thinking. They're barely big enough for me to get in. And I'm kind of a big guy. And I would worm my way in that tank, and you go around to the corners and back here, and finally get to where the probe is. And there's been times when I've been back there, and I had this respirator on, and this special clothing on, these boots, these little booty things, and gloves on. And you get back there, and you can hear your breath, and that's all you can hear. And you realize, I'm in a tight space. I get the probe off, and I put the new probe on, then I got to go out of there. And then sometimes, there's been a couple times where I couldn't even move backwards. It was so cramped. And so for a while, panic starts to rise up.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. I'm not claustrophobic. But I think even people who are not claustrophobic in that situation, when they get stuck, and I was stuck a couple times, and I couldn't figure out how to move. Finally, I moved my knee one way and my ankle another way, and moved my shoulder around. I could start to worm out of there again, because you got to go backwards.
Yeah.
It was not fun diving tanks, but you had to do it. You had to do it. But that's the same kind of idea. It's a confined place like
That's
that.
the way I feel in my
Yeah.
crawl space.
Right.
I don't like to
Don't go down there.
Oh.
You should be get one of the young bucks at church to help you.
Well, they do now.
Okay, good. That's a bad place. I have a crawl space, and it's not. I don't like going down there. Anyway, but those dark places being illumined. That's the point. I kind of got off the path here. The dark places being illumined by God is important for us as well. It says, "For by you, Lord, I can run upon a troop." In other words, I can beat those enemies against me. I can have success, and by you, I have the energy and the strength to leap over a wall. And of course, some of these are metaphors. They're illustrations to prove a point of what he's saying here. So, any questions about those verses? So David really depends on who? God. He depends on God. We should depend on God too. That's the whole idea here. Is David's reflection on what God's done for him. Can God do that for us as well? Sure he can.
Definitely.
Now we're not going to meet a 9-foot tall giant, probably. Maybe. But maybe symbolically, something big in our life, like passing a course to get those credits, to be able to go on into a college or something like that. In some of the cases, the younger folks, right? Could be somebody looking for that new job they need because they moved to a new area. A lot of these things are those big things in life. that we got to remember that God is with us on these things. So we need to trust Him. We need to have that hope in Him. I think we've gone far enough on that. David moved from examining his own attitude and actions to rejoicing in God's faithfulness as well. We see that too, right? But he had that hope and he depends on that as well. Verse 29 of those verses, and I already mentioned this, I think, but it talks a little more about this, focuses on David's testimony and how God rescued him from his enemies. Because he trusted God, he had the courage and passion to fight any battle against any foe. Isn't that a neat feeling to have, that you can do whatever God has empowered you to do, and you can trust Him? You know, it might be an actual foe like David was fighting. It could be something else in our life. But God can still provide the kind of confidence and strength when we humble ourselves before Him. So now, Steve,
Yes.
you went through the time you told me about in your giving that it was a hard thing to come to grips with, right? Do you want to relate anything about how you trusted God in your giving one time in your life? You said, "How can I tithe? I can't do that." And then God blessed you.
Well, it wasn't giving.
With
It was
the
more
job
like,
situation. I'm picking on him because I know he went through this.
Mary Ellen wanted to quit her job with DOT.
That's
and
right.
I just started my job
Yes.
at another company, and she was basically making a whole lot more money than me, but we had just bought a house.
Yeah.
So losing her income is not, we wouldn't be able, literally, I was frustrated about losing the house.
This is back when Emma was quite young too, right?
Yeah, no, I don't even think, Emma wasn't even around at that
So
time.
it was
Just
Bryce.
Christopher and Bryce.
Christopher, yeah.
And I talked with Pastor Lee at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and we sat down and we prayed about this whole thing. And about it, my wife quit on December 31st, and I'm still kind of, but it's like, okay,
What am I gonna
I gotta
do?
trust God, let's go with God. 2.5 weeks later, my supervisor came up to me about 9 o'clock in the evening and says, "I got good news and bad news for you."
I hate that.
And I was like, "Okay, give me the bad news first." He says, "You're in a different tax bracket."
Oh,
I'm going, "Okay, that means what? I'm up here or I'm out of the job."
Yeah.
And he goes, "Oh, and the good news is, here's your pay raise." He had gone through and redid our title, what we were called, from utility operators to facilities operators. It included roughly what amounted to about a 25.4% pay increase.
Oh my
24.5% pay. Anyway, it was huge. It put us up there, and my little brain took off figuring things out, and it's like, oh man, we can make house payment with this. And da-da-da-da-da. And this was a Wednesday night.
Yeah.
Thursday night, we came in, we're sitting at the table doing shift change, and the day shift came in and says, "Hey, you guys, got some bad news. They're doing away with the shift differential." And that's like, it was, at that time, I think it was like 15 cents extra an hour for shift differential for nights. And he says, what they're doing is the day shift doesn't get one. Night shift gets 25%. I think it was, 15% increase. And he says, oh, by the way, company came out, everybody across the board and the whole plant's getting a 10% pay increase. So it just, my salary went up, and it was like, holy smokes, we can make the payment. We can make payment on the house, So I was ecstatically happy. Went home and told my wife, she was happy too. So
God provided for you.
Yeah, God, literally, He did. Because, you don't wind up getting what amounted to almost a 60% pay increase in 2 days without something going on.
Yeah.
And it was nice.
So to God fulfilled that hope that you had.
Yeah.
That Marilyn could stay with the kids and you could be that
She wanted to stay home and homeschool the kids, and
Yeah.
it was fine with me.
It's neat to happen. Yeah.
We just need to make the house payment so we have a school to put them.
So we'll finish up here. So this week, think about how you can apply all these verses we talked about to our own lives as we face struggles and the challenges in life in these kind of areas. That He rescues us. The faithfulness is rewarded. That we have that hope in Him, right? So these three main points is Christians can call upon God in times of adversity. That God rewards those who faithfully follow Him, and that Christians can trust God to be faithful to them. Why do we sometimes neglect praising God? We sometimes forget what he did, right? We're not being reflective like David is, realizing all these things he did for us. So take time to do that. Challenge from our study today is to reflect on how God has guided and taken care of you in your lives. Also strive to live with integrity before Him, be a faithful servant, right? And maintain that hope in what He's going to do. Let's have a word of prayer and then we'll be dismissed. Heavenly Father, thank you for this study. Thank you, Lord, that you show us these things and how you rescue us, how you did that for David, how you do that for us as well, and how you rewarded his faithfulness as well, and how you give us hope in all these trials and these situations that we come across, Lord. Thank you so much that we can understand how you do these things for us, and we can share with others, Lord. Thank you for being our rock that neither moves or cracks, but is steady and we can firm. We can trust that. In your Son's name, amen. So, I do have a song that we could at least look at the verses here real quick. Where was it? Where did I do this? Oh, I lost it. Oh, here it is. It's a hymn actually that and we don't do a lot of hymns anymore. It's called "Love Lifted Me." We'll just do the first verse. You don't have to sing. You don't have to worry about that. But it goes something like this: I was sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore, very deeply stained within, sinking to rise no more. But the master of the sea heard my despairing cry. From the waters lifted me, now safe am I. Love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me, love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me. Anyway, good song, good old song, something to remember. Especially goes along with these verses we talked about. And that's all. So, thank you guys for being with us. And for those of you online, thank you very much for being with us as well. My name is Norm Ellis. This is the Adult One Bible Study at Grace Baptist Church. Today, stand by in the next hour. We have our associate pastor, Derek, who's going to be preaching. Our pastor, Matthew, is away doing some military activities at McCord Air Force Base. So be in prayer for him as well. God bless you all. Thank you.
So we're stuck with Lee again today?
No, Derek.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's right. We said Derek last week.
Doesn't the military give family time for new parents?
Yeah, he took, 2 weeks off? 2.5 weeks off?
From the military?
Okay, he's not active duty. He's reserves.
He's reserved.
Because